Shalom Makayams. Just quickly setting this thing up here. It's on a stand. Whoa. It's like the people. Just trying to this stand set up here. Alright, Shalom Makayams. Shalom to all the brothers on the highways and byways. First, let me give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah, Kodash, Tawada, Amen. Double honors to the elders of GMS, Elder Gabar, Elder Rakah, Elder Ran, Elder Tahar, and double honors to all the camps on the highways and byways, bringing out the words in truth and spirit and sincerity, in the name of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Today we want to talk about the 400 years of slavery, the prophecy that's in the Bible regarding the 400 years of slavery. Now I know some people have heard or been told that the 400 years of slavery in the Bible that's prophesied in Genesis, okay, in the book of Genesis and spoken about in Acts, Exodus and so forth and so on. Some people have heard that it's talking about modern day slavery, slavery that happened in America from 1619, and they think it's till to this year 2019. So you've got some people have been told that. There are also certain Israelite camps that are speaking, saying that, which is absolutely wrong. The 400 years of slavery that's prophesied in the book of Genesis chapter 15 is not talking about the slavery that happened to the African Americans that were taken from the west coast of Africa in the 15th century, around 1619. I mean, the first slave ships came to the Americas in 1492, and the first slave ships actually came to America came from Spain. They didn't come from the west coast of Africa. So that's the first and foremost you must know, is that the first slaves, the first Israelites that were put into slavery were taken from Spain in 1492 and came to the Americas then. But like I said, I've heard people, and I've seen camps speak about this and say that they believe that the 400 years of slavery is talking about from 1619 to now to 2019, which is 400 years, and it's not. The Bible is not speaking about that. The 400 years of slavery in the book of Genesis is to do with ancient Egypt, when we were taken into slavery under the Egyptians, under the different pharaohs, and then the last pharaoh was Ramesses under Moses, who delivered us through the powers of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. So without further ado, let's go into the scriptures and start reading out some scriptures regarding this, right? I think that's the best place to start. Let's go to the scriptures and start reading about this, yeah? So we can start getting an understanding of what the 400 years of slavery is that the Bible is speaking of, right? And so you can see we're going to show you to differ that it's got nothing to do with the modern day slavery. The modern day slavery that we went under in the Americas under the Europeans, called the transatlantic slave trade, that's in the book of Deuteronomy. That's talking about Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, it's all in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Verse 68 tells us about that transatlantic slavery, about the ships that came and brought us to what we know as spiritual Egypt, spiritual Sodom, which is America, the United States. The slavery, the transatlantic slavery, is all prophesied in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. It's not talking about what we're going to read out here in Genesis 15. This is speaking about ancient Egypt slavery. So without no further ado, let's go and get straight to the point. There's a squirrel over there. That just caught my eye. There's a little squirrel over there looking some food. But there you go, that's how the Most High work it. So Genesis chapter 15, we'll start at verse 12, all right? Get your KGVs out, and you should also, when I talk about these scriptures, and especially for those that are new into the truth, like just coming to it in the last couple of years, you should be marking these scriptures down so that if you ever come across someone that speaks about these things, you know exactly how to explain to them and divide it to them, to show them that it's not talking about ancient, it's not talking about modern America, it's talking about ancient Egypt, all right? So Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, it says, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, right? A deep sleep fell upon Abraham. And lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. So a horror of great darkness fell upon Abraham in his sleep. Because remember, when the Lord says, when he comes to us, especially to the prophets, when he came to them, he would speak to them in their sleep, in a dream, in a vision, basically, yeah, through the angels, yeah, that would come and deliver the message to the prophets. The same thing like Abraham. Abraham is a prophet. Remember, Abraham is a prophet, right? And he's our forefather. So verse 13 says, so we're still in the book of Genesis, chapter 15, verse 13. It says, and he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, right? And they shall afflict them 400 years. So that 400 years there in the book of Genesis chapter 15 verse 13 is speaking about ancient Egypt, not modern America, all right? And we're going to prove that clearly to you in the scripture so you have an understanding. It says, and also the nation whom they shall serve I will judge, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. So the Most High told the angel to tell Abraham that also the nation that we're going to serve, those 400 years of affliction, the Most High is going to judge them. But when we're free from our bondage under them, we're going to come out with great substance, right? So what is that great substance that the Lord is speaking of, right? So we will show you. Right, so let's go to Exodus chapter 12, right? Exodus chapter 12, verse 40 and 41. Exodus chapter 12, verse 40. Yeah, so Exodus chapter 12 verse 40. So it says, now the sojourning of the children of Egypt, right? The sojourning of the children of Egypt who dwelt in Egypt, right? Sorry, let's start again. Exodus chapter 12 verse 40, all right? It says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel, I said the children of Egypt, so let me just correct myself, who dwell in Egypt, because that's where we dwell in Egypt, which is ancient Egypt, which we know as North Africa, all right, was 400 years and 30 years. So it was 400 years and 30 years. Because remember, the first 30 years we was living bliss. Joseph was the second in command in Egypt under the Pharaoh then, because he read the Pharaoh's dreams and so forth, and he broke down his dreams and he told him about the 7 years of famine and the 7 years of harvest that they need to, in the 7 years of harvest, they need to stock up stuff for the 7 years of famine that's to come. And he was able to tell the Pharaoh's dream, remember, because he was in prison. He was in prison for a false accusation against I think it was Potiphar, the Egyptian captain's wife, who accused him of making advances to her, and he didn't, and he was in prison for that. And he met the Pharaoh's butler and the Pharaoh's armor bearer in jail. They was in jail for whatever reasons, and one of them got freed, and he was able to tell one of those, I think it was the butler's dreams while I was in jail, and when he was freed he was restored to his post, the butler, and he told them about Joseph, who was in prison at the time, that he's a man that knows to read dreams, all right? So Joseph was in charge. So when it says 430 years, it was 400 years of bondage, slavery, but 30 years of bliss, right? We was living the high life. And it says here, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass that all the hosts of Yahweh went out from the land of Egypt. Right? So at the end of those 430 years, that's when the Israelites left Egypt, ancient Egypt. That's what we're speaking of, ancient Egypt, all right? So if we get that story from here, so you get an understanding. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 46, all right? Move away, fly. 46. Genesis chapter 46. I'm going to start at the top here, right? So we're going to start at the top to give you an understanding of when the Israelites went down into Egypt under Jacob, our forefather, who is the father of the 12 sons, who are the 12 tribes of Israel, all right? Jacob is who? Jacob is Isaac's son. Isaac is who? Isaac is Abraham's son, all right? So it says, and Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, all right? And offered sacrifices unto the Most High, right, of his father Isaac, to the power of his father Isaac, right? So we're in Genesis chapter 46, we're in verse 2, all right, just in case you've lost your place. And the powers, the Most High spake unto Israel in the vision of the night, and said to Jacob, and he said, here am I. So just like how he spoke to Abraham, his grandfather, in the vision of the night, He's, like we said before, this is how the Most High deals when he deals with his prophets. He comes to them in a vision and in a dream. All right. So it's, once again, we're showing you right here again, when the powers spake unto Israel, because the word God there means Elohim, which means the powers, which means the angels, because remember, the angels are the messengers of the Lord. They bring the messages to prophets, right? The Most High doesn't come and have to speak to them directly. He sends his angels to do that. So when you see the word God in the Bible, right, all by itself, it's talking about Elohim. That's the Hebrew word for it, Elohim, which means the powers, which are the angels, all right? So it says, and the Elohim and the powers spake unto Israel in the vision of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am the power, and I am the power and the power of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will make of thee a great nation. Because that's when we became a great nation, in ancient Egypt, all right? He says, I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. All right? So that's talking about his son, because remember, it was the brothers that sold Joseph into, that left him in the pit. And then the Midianites came and took him out and sold him to the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites sold him to the Egyptians, and that's how he ended up in Egypt, basically. All right? He says, and Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. All right? And they took their cattle and their goods which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him. His sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt. All right? So then it goes through, verse 9, it goes through like the sons Reuben and Simeon and Judah and Issachar and Zebulun, Gad, right? It goes through all of the sons and their lineage, right? To show who came then into Egypt. So if we jump down to verse 22, so we're still in Genesis chapter 46, verse 22, we're going to jump down to verse 22, and it says, these are the sons of Rachel, which were born to Jacob. In all the souls were 14, and the sons of Dan, and the sons of Naphtali, Jezeel, and Guna, and Jazer, and Shelem, right? And then it talks about the sons of Bela, which gave to Jacob and Rachel, and so forth. So then it's talking about all of Jacob's children under his 2 wives and his 2 concubines. So his wives were who? Leah and Rachel were the sisters, and his concubines was, what's her name? Bela was one of the concubines, and the other concubine was it Bela? I forget her name. Hold on a minute, we're gonna get it out here. These were Leah's children. Zebulun, Leah, the daughter of Dinah, Zilpah and Bela. Those were the 2 concubines, right? So Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah, was Leah's concubine, and Bela was Rachel's concubine. And remember also, Jacob had a daughter called Dinah. He had 12 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter's name was Dinah. All right. So it says this. So if we jump down to verse 26. So we're still in Genesis chapter 46, verse 26. So it says, all the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his lions, besides Jacob's sons, wives, and all the souls, were 66. So that's 66. 66 is 66. All right. And then it says, verse 27 says, and the sons of Joseph, which were born to him in Egypt, were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came into Egypt, were 10. So the whole Israelite family, including Joseph and his 2 sons, made up to 70, right? Including Jacob and all of his offsprings, right? And his wives and his sons' wives. And Joseph and his sons equaled 70. So it was 70 of them that came down, that was in Egypt, that was considered the Israelites. And that's how they started off. They started off as a people of 70. Now this is the beginning of the 30 years that they had of bliss. So when we read here in Exodus chapter 12, verse 40, when it says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Those 30 years was the 30 years that we lived under bliss, because Joseph was second in command to Pharaoh. There was no other power higher than Joseph than Pharaoh himself. And then the 400 years is the 400 years of bondage, because once that Pharaoh died, he no longer knew. He said he didn't know Joseph. So Leighton might just quickly tell you here. Jobs ruled over Egypt. So I'm gonna just bring it out for you. The Pharaoh, here it is. Blessed him. Joseph is blessed. He's second in command. Where is it? Under the Pharaoh, here it is. And it shall go to pass, increase, you shall give fifth unto the Pharaoh. Right, so we'll show you right here. So we're in Genesis chapter 47, verse 22. All right, to show you here that those 30 years are 30 years of bliss. It says, and Joseph bought all the land. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's, right? Because that's to do with the 7 years of famine. And as for the people, he removed them to the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof, right? Only the land of the priests brought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them to Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Wherefore they sold not their lands. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is the seed for you, and shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the fifth of your part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for the seed of the field of your foods, of them, of your households, and the food of your little ones. So this is when Joseph was accumulating all of that wealth for the Pharaohs, all right? Just to show you that they were living a bliss life, that Joseph was the one in charge of all of that, all right? So, what does it say here? Where is it? Right, so if we go to Exodus, this is when it will change. This is when that bliss changed, right? Exodus chapter 1, verse... Where is it? Where should we start at? Start at verse 9. Exodus chapter 1, verse 9. And it says, And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more than mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. It come to pass that when they falleth out war, then join unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. All right, it says, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh the treasured cities of Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. Right, that's what's the 40. And it says, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage. Hard bondage is slavery. All right, this is happening in ancient Egypt, in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was in rigor. Right, so let's read that again. Exodus chapter 9, verse 14. It says, we start at verse 13. It says, and the Egyptians, right, the ancient Egyptians, made the children of Israel to serve in rigor, right? R-I-G-O-U-R, which means hard bondage. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar, right? And in brick. So that's all the stuff that it was using to build those cities in Pithom and Ramesses. And all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor, right? So this is when all of this was going on. So this was the 400 years of persecution that was happening to us. So we're going to jump around here. We're going to go to Acts chapter 7. So Stephen speaks about this as well. All right. So we can show you the prophecies when it speaks about the 400 years of slavery in the Bible, right? And I say again, it's not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. It's talking about ancient Egypt, right, under the pharaohs. So to confirm that, we go to the book of Acts, right? So you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to what Stephen says, all right? In the book of Acts, chapter 7, verse... Where are we? The book of Acts, chapter 7, verse 6, all right? So now we're in the book of Acts, we're in the New Testament. And this is what Stephen said. This was part of Stephen's defense, right? When he was speaking to the Pharisees and to Saul, right? Paul. And the Most High spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, all right? and that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years. Right, let's see what Stephen is referring to. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, says the Most High. And after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. All right, he's talking about Israel. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begat Isaac and circumcised him the 8th day. And Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 patriarchs, which are the 12 sons, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. Right? And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. All right? You can see Stephen's talking about that. But the Most High was with him. What I spoke about earlier, how the brothers, the rest of the brothers, Jacob's sons, sold Joseph, which was Jacob's favorite, into slavery, all right? Or left him in a pit. And it was the Midianites that picked him up, sold him to the Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites sold him to the Arabs, sold him to the Egyptians, and this is how he ended up in slavery. And delivered him out of all of his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of the Pharaoh, king, right, of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. So that's what I spoke about earlier when I was saying to you that Joseph was made second in command under the Pharaoh, because he was able to read the Pharaoh's dreams, and it was through the Pharaoh's butler, who was in prison with Joseph, who Joseph read and was able to read the dreams of the butler and the armor bearer of the Pharaoh, who they were both locked up at the same time as Joseph. And when the butler was released and restored to his position, and the Pharaoh had a dream, he told them about Joseph, this man in jail who could read dreams, right? So when it says here, Acts chapter 7 verse 10, and it says, and delivered him out of all his affliction, and gave him favor, right, talking about Joseph, and wisdom in the sight of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. So this explains Joseph being second in command, all right? It says, now there came a dearth over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers found no substance, right? So that great dearth and affliction was the 7 years of famine that Joseph told the Pharaoh what his dream was about, all right? But when Jacob heard that there was corn in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first, right, which were his sons. And at the second time, Joseph was made known to his brethren, because remember, Joseph hid himself to his brothers the first time, and when they came back with the rest of their brothers, that's when Joseph revealed himself to his brother, to say, look, it's me, it's Joseph, right? It's another indication. Don't mean to go off on a different direction, but this is another indication to show you that Joseph, the Israelites, were a so-called nation of black people, because Joseph was speaking to his brothers, right? And if he was a so-called white man, they would have recognized him pronto, straight away. They would have seen that was Joseph, all right? It says, then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred, 75 souls, right? And that's what we're talking about. Those are the people that came down to Israel, all of that made up the family of the Israelites at that time, all right? So Jacob went down into Egypt and died, he and our fathers, and were carried over into Shechem and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham bought for a sum of money, right, of the sons of Emor and the father of Shechem. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, when the Most High had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt, what we read about in Exodus, right? In Exodus chapter 1, we read that a little while ago when it says, we'll quickly just bring up that precept again, for those of you that might not realize what I said there, connected the dots, when it says here in Exodus chapter 1, verse 9, and it says, and the people, and Exodus chapter 1 verse 9, and he said unto the people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come and let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when they fall without any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us. So get we up unto them unto the field, because they became a great nation. This is where the Israelites became a great nation, in the land of Egypt, right? Ancient Egypt, right? So go back to Acts chapter 7. So it says here, Acts chapter 7 verse 17. It says, but when the time of the promise drew nigh, which the Most High had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt, right? Till another king arose, which knew not Joseph, right? So that's the king, the Pharaoh that arose and did not know Joseph. That Pharaoh, that royal family did not know Joseph, right? Then the same dealt subtlety with our kindred, and evil entreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children to the end that they might not live, all right? So This is when the affliction started, when Joseph lost his position, when the Pharaoh died that Joseph was ruling under, right? Joseph was second in command to that Pharaoh. When he died, the new royal Pharaoh Egyptian family that came in did not know Joseph's or his family, Jacob and his brothers, Judah, Simeon, Dan, Issachar, Reuben, and so on and so forth. He did not know these people, right? He did not know them. They were given a beautiful bit of land by Joseph to live in as well, all right? And it says, the same dealt subtlety with our kindred and evil entreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children to the end that they might not live. Right? And then it says, in which time Moses was born and was exceedingly fair and nourished up his father's house 3 months. All right? So that's another precept showing you that Stephen understood that the 400 years that it speaks of in the Bible, in the book of Exodus and in the book of Genesis, is the 400 years that the Israelites spent under the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, all right, and pharaohs, not modern Egypt, not what we know spiritually as Sodom and Egypt, America today. It's nothing to do with the transatlantic slave trade. Those are 2 different prophecies. The prophecies about the transatlantic slave trade is what? Genesis chapter 28. All right, it's simple, it's all in there. We've gone over that many a times. I have many videos on my site that breaks down Deuteronomy chapter 28. That's the prophecies to do with the Israelites and the transatlantic slave trade. So when Stephen said here again, we go back, Stephen says here in Acts chapter 7, we're still in Acts chapter 7, verse 6, when he said, and the Most High spake on the wise that his seed, which are the Israelites, should sojourn in a strange land. That strange land is Egypt. And that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years. That is ancient Egypt. That's got nothing to do with the transatlantic slave trade. Those are 2 separate prophecies, 2 separate incidents, 2 separate times. There is nothing to do with the 400 years that the Bible speaks about. It's got nothing to do with the 400 years that our ancestors in the West Indies, in the Americas, in South America, who were taken on transatlantic slave trade, it's got nothing to do with that, just so you understand that, all right? Galatians chapter 3, I'm going to bring out another precept for you. Galatians chapter 3, verse 15. Galatians, where are we? Galatians chapter 3, I've gone too far. Galatians chapter 3, I'm going to bring out another precept here to confirm that. Sorry people. Excuse me. Galatians chapter 3, verse 15. We start at verse 15, right? The book of Galatians. It says, brethren, I speak after the manner of men. All right, listen carefully. Though it be by a man's covenant, because remember the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about the promised land, the chosen people, that these are his chosen people. Though it be a man's covenant, yet if it be confirmed, no man disannuls or addeth thereto. All right, because it can never be disannulled. All right. Shalom to the Akiyams on the comment board. I may not be reading out anything that you guys are putting up, but shalom to the Akiyams on the comment boards, yeah? So it says here, verse 16, so we're still in the book of Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. It says, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made, all right? He says not unto seeds as of many, but as of one. And so thy seed, which is Yahushua, because remember, Abraham had other children. He had, Ishmael was his firstborn, which was by Hagar the handmaid. Isaac was his secondborn, which was by Sarah. That's where the promise went to. And then he also had 6 other children for Keturah, right? Remember, after Sarah died, he took on Keturah, became his wife, and he had 6 children with her. But the promise was not given to any of those. The promise was always for Abraham. Abraham was for his son Isaac, and then Isaac had 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, and the promise was not for Esau, it was for Jacob. All right, so that was the promised line, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then the 12 sons, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, so verse 17 says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Most High in Yahushua, the law, which was 430 years after, right? See, so the covenant, right, after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect. So that 430 years after, that's talking about the bondage, the time that the Israelites were in Egypt, right? Because remember, the laws wasn't given to Moses until when? Until the Israelites were delivered out of Egypt, right? Moses was the one who, through the powers of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, delivered the Israelites out of Egypt. All right, remember, he was the one that went to the Pharaoh, all right, and the 10 plagues and so forth and this and that. And after the Most High, after the 10th plague, when he killed all the firstborn of all the sons and all the firstborn of all the cattle and the animals and so forth in Egypt, the Israelites were freed by the Pharaoh, because remember, the Most High hardened the Pharaoh's heart to not deliver Israel, all right? And it took 10 plagues for the Pharaoh to come to his senses and deliver them and to free them. So that the law and the covenant wasn't given until Moses was when the Israelites were freed by the Egyptians, and they was in where? They was in the wilderness. And he went up to where? He went up to Mount Sinai to get the tablets, right? The laws, commandments and statutes. So Paul makes it quite clear here again with the understanding that Paul knows that the 430 years that the Bible speaks of, the 400 years that the Bible speaks of, is not talking about some future prophecy. Paul knows that that had already taken place. This is why he said, I'm going to say it again, Galatians chapter 3, verse 17. Listen carefully. This is what Paul says. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Most High in Yahweh Shai, the law, which was 430 years after, because it was after the bondage. Before we had the what? The promises was given to them. They didn't have a covenant and a law and statutes and commandments, did they? Abraham was given what? The promises. So if we jump back up a verse, just so you get an understanding again of how all the dots connect. In verse 16, so we're still in the book of Galatians, chapter 3, verse 16, we jumped up a verse. It says, now to Abraham and his seed, all right, were the promises made. Who was that seed? Isaac, Jacob. That was the promises. Those were the forefathers. And Jacob had the 12 sons, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. He says not unto seeds, because Abraham had other seeds. He had Ishmael, was his first seed, and he had 6 other seeds from Keturah, but the promises wasn't given to them. But at that time, it was just the promises, because we hadn't gone down into Egypt yet. We hadn't spent that 400 years in bondage in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, and the 30 years of bliss and the 400 years of bondage. We hadn't gone down to Egypt yet. Jacob and his 12 sons and their wives and their children hadn't gone down to join his son Joseph, who was second in command in Egypt yet. All right. So it says, but as of one, and of thy seed, which is Yahweh Shai. It says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Most High in Yahweh Shai, the law was given to Moses when? After the 430 years of bondage, after they were delivered out of Egypt, when they spent the 40 years in the wilderness. Moses had gone up to Mount Sinai, and that's when they got the laws. That's when he got the tablets, and the Lord came to him and visited Moses in the top of Mount Sinai to give him the laws, commandments and statutes to bring down to the children of Israel. I remember when he came down the first time, the children of Israel had built a gold calf and was worshipping it, and it so enraged Moses that he threw down the tablets and broke them. So he had to go back up to and then he said, who is with me and the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, and who is against me? And then remember, they said he killed 7,000 men, were swallowed up in a crater that the Most High created, and destroyed them right in front of the people. And then Moses had to go back up to Mount Sinai to get the tablets a second time with the laws, commandments, statute. But all this took place after the 400 years of bondage that we spent in Egypt, the 30 years of bliss, and then plus the 400 years of bondage. This took place after that, because Moses was born at the end of our slavery, our bondage in Egypt. All right. So it says, so Paul says here, verse 17, it says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Most High in Yahweh Shai, the law, which was 430 years after, you understand, cannot disannul that it should make the promise of none effect. For if it's right, so it can't disannul, but he was given to him 430 years after. Paul understood this. So once again, if someone tries to say to you that the 400 years in the Bible is speaking of the transatlantic slave trade, they are absolutely wrong in every aspect, because it is not speaking about the transatlantic slave trade. It's speaking about the 400 years that we spent in ancient Egypt. So let's go to Psalms chapter 78 to confirm it again. So let's see what David says. All right. So Stephen understood this, all right, who was stoned to death by Paul himself and his compatriots, right? The Apostle Paul understood this. So let's see if King David understood this. This is why I say you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to what the prophet said and our forefathers said. Let's see if they understood that when the Bible spoke about the 400 years of slavery, of bondage that was told to Abraham by the angel. Let's see if the prophets understood that it was talking about ancient Egypt or America's transatlantic slave trade. All right? So we're in the book of Psalms chapter 78 verse 42. We're going to start at verse 42. All right? It says, they remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. All right? How he had wrought his signs in Egypt and his wonders in the field of Zoan, and turned their rivers into blood and their floods that they could not drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. So these are the 10 plagues that I spoke about a little while ago. He gave also their increase unto the caterpillar, right, and their labor unto the locust. He destroyed their vines and hell, and their sycamore trees with frost. All right. He says he gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to the thunderbolts. All right. He says he cast upon them the fierceness of his anger. Right? These are the plagues, wrath and indignation and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. Right? He made way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to pestilence. Right? And smote all the firstborn in Egypt. That was the last plague, when he killed all the firstborn in Egypt. Who did that? That angel that did that was Yahushai. That wasn't any angel. That was actually Yahushai who came and did that one. That did that deed. All right. He said, and he smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of the strength in the tabernacles of Ham. Ham, because Mitzarism or Mitazerm, which I pronounce it, is one of Ham's 4 sons. All right. Mitzarism is what we know as Egypt. Right, modern day Egypt, which is North African ancient Egypt. All right, remember Ham had 4 sons: Cush, Mitzrayim, Phut, and Lud. Those were his 4 sons. All right. He says, but made his own people to go forth like sheep, and guided them into the wilderness like a flock. So when he says that, he's saying when he made his own people, right, to go forth like sheep and guide them in the wilderness like a flock, that's them coming out of Egypt under the 400 years of bondage, ancient Egypt. All right. Then it says here, and he led them on safety, so that they feared not, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. All right. So what did they have to cross? They crossed the Red Sea. All right. That's what they did. They crossed the Red Sea. Well, it was actually the Red Sea itself. It was more further up. All right. The swampy parts of it. That's where they crossed. All right. It says, and he brought them to the border of his sanctuary, right, even to his mountain, which is Mount Sinai, where Moses went up and got the laws, commandments, and statutes, the tablets, right, with his right hand had purchased, right. He cast out the heathen also before them, and divided them an inheritance by line, and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in the tents. What tents are those? Those tents are talking about the 12 tribes of Israel. That's talking about Canaan, the land of Israel. That's what that's talking about. All right. Oh, all right. I'm running out of battery here. I'm gonna give you one more. Psalms chapter 105 verse 23. One more precept here. Exodus 3. Did we give Exodus 3 verse 16? Let's see if there we go there. Exodus 3. Exodus 3. Exodus 3. Exodus 3 verse 16. All right, listen carefully. It says, go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, the Lord Yahweh of your fathers, the power of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have shortly visited you, and seen that which is done unto you in Egypt, ancient Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you out of the affliction of Egypt unto the land of the Canaanites. And we just read about that in Psalm 78. And the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites unto a land flowing with milk and honey. Because those were the Hamites that occupied the land. Canaan was Canaan was Cush's son. Cush's son. Correct me if I'm wrong on the comment board, but I believe he was Cush's son. And these were the lines from Canaan. These are the Canaanites. The Canaanites are Hamites, are African. All right. Canaan was, yeah, because he had Cush, Mitzrayim, part of Lud. Yeah, Canaan was the grandson of Ham. All right, and I believe it was Cush's son. Canaan was actually Cush's son. All right, so the Canaanites are who? The Hittites, the Amorites. These are all Canaanites. The Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, into the land flowing with milk and honey. Talking about the land of Israel, because it was originally called Canaan. Right, and they shall hearken to thy voice, and thou shalt come, thou and the elders of Israel, unto the king of Egypt, and you shall say unto him, the Lord power Yahweh of the Hebrews, not of the world. Right. Just of the Hebrews, just like it says, he's only the God of the Hebrews. He's not the Most High or the power, or Yahweh is not. He's not concerned about any other nation in terms of who his chosen people. He is the God of the Hebrews, just like it says here. The Lord God of the Hebrews has met with us, and now let us go. We beseech thee 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our power. And I am sure that the king of the Egypt will not let you go. No, not by a mighty hand, right? And I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, and I will do in the midst thereof, and after all that he will let you go. And after that he will let you go, right? Verse 21. So we're still in Exodus chapter 3, verse 21. And it says, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when ye go, ye shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor and of her that sojourneth in the house jewels of silver, jewels of gold, remnant. Ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and ye shall spoil the Egyptians. Right? And we spoke about that where? In Genesis 15, we spoke about that. We spoke about that when we started this session. Genesis chapter 15, verse 14. And it says, and also, we'll start at verse 13. It says, and he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed, which are the children of Israel, shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years, the 400 years of bondage in ancient Egypt. Verse 14, and also the nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, thou shalt be buried in a good old age. So he said they're going to come out with great substance. So what does it say in the book of Exodus? Chapter 3. Verse 21, it says, and I will give the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass, all right? When you go, you shall not go empty. Why? Because it was told Abraham in the prophecy that what? In Genesis chapter 15, verse 14, and also the nation whom they shall serve will I judge, are the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, and afterwards they shall come out with great substance. Exodus chapter 3, verse 22. Verse 21, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass, when you go, you shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of his neighbor and of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold and remnant, and ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and ye shall spoil the Egyptians. So it's all quite clear there that the 400 years of slavery in the Bible is not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. It is talking about ancient Egypt, all right? The transatlantic slave trade, the prophecies of the transatlantic slave trade are in the book of Joel, chapter 3, all right? And also in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. And it's also in other places, but it is not talking about the 400 years. The 400 years in the Bible, when it speaks about the 400 years of bondage, hard bondage, it is talking about ancient Egypt under the ancient pharaohs, all right? And I'm sure I made it quite clear that it's not talking about America from 1619 to 2019 to this year. It's not talking about that. So if you hear people keep telling you that, or if you hear that in a conversation, put them right. Let them know Give them the precepts of the scriptures that I gave you. Genesis 15 verse 12 to 14, Acts 7 verse 6 to 22, Exodus 12 verse 40 to 41, Galatians chapter 3 verse 15 to 18, Genesis chapter 46 verse 1 to 27, Exodus chapter 3 verse 16 to 22, and Psalms 78 verse 42 to 55. Just give them the precepts. Let's go through them. Let them know. Put them right. All right. So I pray this was an edifying lessons to the brothers and sisters out there. Shalom to the Akiyams and the comment boards. I don't read anything out today from there, if there was anything up there. But shalom to the Akiyams that tune in live, and shalom to the Akiyams that will tune in later. And I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim, Rakah, Kodash, Tawada, Amen. All right. Double honors to the elders of GMS. Keep up the faith, brothers, and I'll tune in to you probably later on tonight. Put up another video, do another prime time for you. All right. All praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim, Rakah, Kodash, Tawada, Amen. Shalom Akayams.